Hi chip tuners, welcome to the video. My name's Gareth Morris, W Morris by the way, yeah. So in this series I'm teaching you how to use the sound editor in maxYMiser, which is my Atari ST tracking software. In the first video we covered how to buy an Atari and how to load maxYMiser onto it, and in the previous video we covered some basics of the instrument editor. And now we're going to continue with the instrument editor and look at the buzzer. Now here is again the diagram of the Atari ST gwEm2149 sound chip architecture. So last week we kind of covered this part, the square wave and the white noise, and to a certain extent also the volume. But today we're covering the envelope generator, aka the buzzer. People discovered after some time that you could set this envelope generator in the audible frequency range. And the demo sceners at the time called it the buzzer. Actually, we still call it that. Now, certain of these envelope shapes give a repeating waveform. One of them kind of looks a bit like a triangle wave, and we call that the soft buzzer. One of them looks like a Sawtooth wave, and we call that the hard buzzer. And these are both available in positive or negative phases. It's also possible to do ring modulation of the buzzer with the square wave and also with the noise. And it gives a kind of phasing effect, which I'll show you in a minute. In a way, this was considered the first YM special effect because the envelope generator was meant to generate envelopes, not really as a noise source itself, although it does sound great. One drawback to using the buzzer is because it was designed to work at low frequencies to generate an envelope. It has quite bad frequency resolution, particularly for high notes, so that can sometimes cause weird effects if you try and play high notes with it. So I've got a little example here of what the buzzer sounds like by a musician called Jess, who actually is a French chip tuner, and he has made lots of great tunes using the buzzer. And I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he seems like a really nice guy. I'll link this video to him. And you can hear that bass sound sounds a little bit different to what we had in the last video, because the last video our bass sound was just a square wave, whereas this one is the Sawtooth wave buzzer. So when you load maxYMiser and start to look at the buzzer, these are the parts of the instrument editor that you'll need to consider. So in this part here, it works exactly like the square wave that we covered last time. You can choose to apply some of the modifiers to the frequency, for example, the portamento, arpeggio, vibrato. You can choose whether you apply those or not, exactly the same as the square wave. In this field here, the buzzer wave, you can choose the waveform of the buzzer. This field here, start syn, allows you to start the buzzer at the same point every time you play a note, or you can disable it and it runs freely. And this fixed detune, which I'll explain, allows you to detune between the square wave and the buzzer for interesting ring modulation effects. So now we're going to go straight into firing up the Atari and getting in some practice. So these are the things I'm going to cover in the practical part. Online help relating to the buzzer, how to make a simple buzzer just playing on its own, how to combine that with the square wave, the frequency effects that you can do, detuning, how to get acidic sounding resonant effects, and finally what this start synchronization does and all the cool effects you can get with that. So stay tuned, come back in a second when we've got the Atari and we'll go through all that. Welcome back. We've got maxYMiser loaded, so let's go into how you can create a buzzer. So I want to point some things out in the online help related to the buzzer. Last time I showed you the online help, which you can get by clicking help. So we want to cover some buzzer related things. So the buzzer is a gwEm sound chip effect, so it's in the gwEm section. Click there, and straight away in the first page we can see here a listing of all of the buzzer waveforms. Now the important ones are the ones which repeat. So this number 8, which is a sawtooth, A is the triangle, C, which is a kind of inverse sawtooth, and E, which is an inverse triangle. Also, I'll show you the mixer related to that. So the buzzer is the third column. Okay. I'll go back here so we can refer to the waveforms. Now the first thing I want to show you is the buzzer on its own. So right click up here to name your instrument. I'll just call it buzzer. And now how to create a basic buzzer sound. So go to the mixer, when that's highlighted press N for a new sequence. And then we go to the sequence editor. Now, I just showed you that the buzzer was the third column, so I put a 1 into the third column. Now, do we have a buzzer? No. We should increase the volume. Now, you might remember from the diagram I drew that you can choose between having volume or having the buzzer. That's correct. But if the volume is 0, then it will mute the buzzer as well. That's a maxYMiser feature. It allows you to control the length of the note the same way as the other instruments. So we'll select volume, press N for a new sequence, and then F, which is the maximum. Actually, we could put any value there. So now do we hear a buzzer? Still don't hear a buzzer. We need to select the buzzer waveform. So at the moment, it's selected to be 0, which doesn't repeat. We'll just get a clicking sound when we press it, and it won't have a repeating waveform. So we need to choose one of these repeating waveforms. So let's choose 8, which is the first one, which is a sawtooth. So we click here, the buzzer waveform, and we choose 8 for the repeating sawtooth wave. Now, do we hear something? Definitely. And you can kind of hear why it's called the buzzer. Let's try one of the other waveforms out. Let's try out A, which is the wave which looks a bit like a triangle. So select the buzzer wave and then press A for that waveform. And well, let's play some notes. So the first thing you notice is the sound is much softer, and it's also 1 octave deeper than the sawtooth wave. It's nice and deep, nice and rich. C and E are also repeating waveforms, but they just have 180 degrees out of phase, so they don't sound any different at this stage. I'll show you what you can do with those a bit later on. So that's the buzzer on its own. But what happens if you would combine the buzzer with the square wave? So we'll go back to the mixer. So I'm going to click on the mixer here. So we've just got the buzzer enabled. I'm going to adjust it to enable the square wave as well. So now we've got the square wave and the buzzer. I'm going to play a few notes. So there's a few things that you can hear. This phasing effect is the buzzer and the square wave modulating against each other. Because the frequencies of each aren't exactly the same, they drift in and out of phase. Now the higher note that we play, the faster the phasing, and the reason for that is the buzzer has much lower frequency resolution, so it can't get the note as precise, so the phasing effect is much more pronounced. Let's try this now with the square wave. So click the buzzer wave and we'll choose 8 for the Sawtooth Wave, the hard buzzer. It's an octave higher. Let's drop down. Now that's clearly usable for some cool chiptune bass lines. Let's show you what else you can do with that. I showed you in the earlier part that all of these things work in exactly the same way as the square wave did. So let's just go back to the simple buzzer. Click down here, 0 there to disable the square wave. Just got the Sawtooth Wave on its own. Let's try an arpeggio with the buzzer. So I'm going to click here to enable the arpeggio on the buzzer, and click arpeggio here, press N for a new sequence down here. And I'm going to put 0, 4, 7 in for the major chord, exactly like we did in the last video. Insert. There we are. So now we'll hear the buzzer but with an arpeggio on the top. Cool, eh? And you can also do vibrato if you want, or actually any of these. You can do a fixed frequency or whatever. So this is all very cool. I'm going to disable the arpeggio for now. And I want to show you what happens if we have the square wave and the buzzer, but we adjust this detune here. What will happen when we do that? So click back on this mixer sequence. It brings it up down here, and I'm going to go to the second column and re-enable the square wave. We'll go back to the previous sound. You can see that, well, here rather, that the square wave and the buzzer are going in and out of phase. So I want to try this feature out, which is the detune. So I'm going to enable the detuning on the square wave part of the sound by clicking here. I could also enable it on the buzzer part of the sound, and it would do more or less the same thing. But I'm going to just do the square wave. So click here, and that illuminates this field, and it shows that the detune's enabled. At the moment, it's not doing any detuning. So as you can see, there is 2 halves to this separated by a decimal point. On the left side, the larger part, you can adjust the detuning by semitones, whole semitones. And on this side, you adjust it with a much more fine control. It's nothing musical. This is the actual smallest increment that the YM is able to adjust the frequency by. So I will show you some of that. Here is our basic sound. What happens if I detune by 3 semitones? Click on this, press the up arrow 3 times. Yeah, you can clearly hear a ring modulation effect. Probably not that useful. If we go to 7, that is like having a power chord, and that might be more musical. Yeah, definitely thicker. We can go much higher, so C, as I explained in the last video, is 12 in hexadecimal, so that will be 1 octave. So we're going to go for C here, and I'll show you that. It's pretty useful. Now, that's making the square wave go up. We can go down as well as up. So I'm going back to 0 here. So that's -1, all Fs. -2, -3, -4, -5. So when we play this, just to show you what it sounds like. Pretty dirty, definitely a good sound. This is all with the Sawtooth Wave 8. So I'll show you what it sounds like also with the triangle. It sounds a bit different. It still sounds very good. Very thick, a bit softer, much more warm sound. That is the whole semitone detune. You can, if you like, adjust by these very fine increments. Show you what that does. Not much until you get to higher numbers. But again, very useful, very usable sounds. The best thing to do here is to experiment and try different waveforms, try different detunings, see what kind of sounds you can get out of it. And the next extension to using the detune is to show you how to get these fake resonant effects, these fake filter acidic kind of effects. So this is a sound which is made by the square wave and the buzzer together. You can use the hard buzzer, the sawtooth, or the soft buzzer. I'm going to use the hard buzzer because I think it has a bit more of an aggressive sound, which suits this quite well. 8 for the hard buzzer. So we want to detune the square wave and the buzzer, but we want to do this so that the amount of detuning changes over time. So this fixed detune that I've just showed you, as useful though it is fixed over time. So another way we can do the detuning is to enable the arpeggio or the vibrato on one of these parts of the sound only. So I'm going to remove this fixed detune and I'm going to apply the arpeggio to the square wave. Now we have a arpeggio here from earlier, which I'm just going to clear now. So here is the sound at the moment. It'll just be hard buzzer and the square wave together. Okay. So we want to do some extreme detuning. I'm going to make this sequence here as long as possible. To do that, I'm going to click on the length field here and just push that to the maximum. So we want to start with the square wave at a high frequency and then have it reduce and all the time it will be modulating with the buzzer, which isn't changing in frequency. There's a little tool in maxYMiser which helps you with that, called the SEXT, which stands for Sequence Editor Extension. So this is the part that we want. This will generate sequences for us without us having to type them in. So we can start with a sequence with 0 and go higher. So I'm going to type in a number here, which is 18, which is 24 in hex, so that'll be 2 octaves. We can select the number of oscillations we want here by clicking Oscillations. You can increase that. RA stands for ramp, so it will just go up halfway, and that's what we want. So we generate a downward ramp by clicking this, and that should appear in this sequence editor here. Done. Let's try and see what that sounds like. Right, that is sounding pretty good, but you can hear that the sequence is repeating. Now we know how to fix that from the last video. We just choose repeat here and put it onto the last step. Let's hear that now. It's sounding good, but we can tweak that to make it sound better. The first thing is that I would say that it's much too short. So we can adjust the sequence speed here. 1 is the fastest. If we increase that, it will slow down the rate that it goes through the sequence. So I'm going to click sequence speed and change it to 2. See what that sounds like. Sounding a lot better. I would say it needs to scream even more, so I'm going to increase the value of this maximum here. I don't really know what to. I'll just put a high number in there. Downward ramp. You can see it's appeared down here. Let's see, listen to that. Yep. There you go. That is your acid effect. And as you can probably see, there is a lot that we can do to experiment with that. We could change the waveform to the soft buzzer. We could have different frequencies here. We can play with the exact values in this sequence. You can start to make this effect your own. You can even multiply the frequency adjustment by enabling some of these other things at the same time. So you could add vibrato to that, or you could add fixed detune to that sound. Again, it's up to you to experiment with that. So the last thing that I want to show you in today's video is this field here, which I showed you, which is the start synchronization. So I'm just going to clear all of these. Well, I'll disable the arpeggio, and that will take us back to a more basic sound. Right, there we go. Now, if we listen to this sound when I press a note, you'll hear that the sound doesn't always sound the same each time I press it. The reason for that is that the Sawtooth Wave of the hard buzzer and the square wave are running completely independently of each other while the sound isn't playing. So you can hear that when I press that each time, although sometimes it does sound very close to the previous note, there's not really any kind of pattern in there. If I enable this start sync, what this does is it tells the YM to start the waveform of the square wave and the waveform of the hard buzzer at exactly the same moment, which means every time you press the key, it will always sound the same. So I click this and use the arrow keys. That's Y means the sync is enabled. Now you'll hear the difference. Every time the same. Now this can be a good or a bad thing. It depends on the context you're using the instrument in your song. I like to have that enabled because I feel that it gives my bass lines more repeatability. But this is where I can show you what happens if you choose the other Sawtooth Wave. So I'm going to click back here on the help. Now we've got 8 at the moment, which is this Sawtooth Wave. Now the other Sawtooth Wave we have is C. And now you'll be able to hear a difference between the two. If I go to C, and that's the difference between that and the other Sawtooth. You can see, or rather hear, that this is kind of, you're getting the upward part there of the Sawtooth Wave, and with the other sound you're getting the downward part. Again, these are very subtle things, but if you try both and listen to your track, you can choose which one is the best for you. This is especially powerful when you start doing detuning between the buzzer and the square wave. You can make a sound which can be kind of interesting but not so great, with a few minor tweaks like choosing the right phase of the buzzer and choosing whether you have this sync on or off. You can turn a decent sound into a really good sound. And again, this is up to you to experiment with, because it entirely depends on the notes that you're playing and the track you're making. So that's all for the buzzer. Come back next time because we're going to look at timer effects.